ready to question everything you thought you knew about American history. We're going to do a deep dive on some seriously controversial claims about the American Revolution, the Constitution, and the forces that may have shaped them.
It's going to be a wild ride.
It really is. We've got a 2-hour conversation between 3 researchers with some, let's just say, outside-the-box viewpoints to unpack.
What I find so interesting is how they weave together these seemingly disparate events and figures. It's not just dates and names. They're crafting a narrative.
A narrative that really challenges the traditional one.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start with the American Revolution. Everyone loves a good fight for freedom story, right? But what if it wasn't that simple?
Right.
These researchers suggest that the revolution was less about lofty ideals like liberty and more about, well, cold, hard cash.
They basically argue it was a power play by a small, elite group, the aristocracy of the time. Think wealthy merchants, landowners, the 1% of the 18th century.
The 1%ers.
Yes. And these guys, they wanted more control over their own affairs. They felt like British policies, especially about taxes, were cramping their style.
Well, and that is the part they always teach you about taxation without representation.
Right, exactly. And, they emphasize how few colonists actually fought in the revolution.
Oh, really?
Only like 3 to 5% of the population, according to them.
Whoa.
Which makes you think, whose interests did this revolution really serve? Was it really this grassroots movement for liberty? Or was it something else?
Was a power grab.
Yeah, by a select few to gain more power and wealth for themselves.
That is interesting. So then they connect that to the Constitution, saying that it's not exactly the pristine, perfect document we often hold it up to be.
They say it's flawed.
They do.
They believe that, like the Revolution, the Constitution primarily served the interests of its framers again, those elites who stood to gain the most from this system that they were setting up.
So hold on. Are they saying the Constitution, this bedrock of American democracy, was designed to benefit a select few from the very beginning?
That's what they're claiming. And to make their case, they point to things like the original New Jersey Constitution,
Okay.
which, according to them, explicitly states that it was never actually ratified by the people of New Jersey.
Interesting.
Yeah, if the states themselves weren't even giving their full consent, who was?
That's a great question. Who was consenting?
Well, they suggest that powerful entities, groups like the Virginia Land Company, had a much bigger hand in shaping early America than we often realize. This company, just so you know, they had land holdings stretching all the way from Maine down to Georgia.
Yeah.
And who controlled them? European interests.
It's like we're pawns on a chessboard.
That's exactly it. And get this, George Washington, the father of our country, was a land surveyor for this very company.
That you wonder.
Right. It really makes you wonder about his true motivations for leading the revolution.
Was he a loyal British subject?
Well, they even found a quote where Washington himself supposedly refers to himself that way as a loyal British subject.
Wow.
Which directly challenges this image we have of him as this staunch advocate for independence,
Right, right.
And this is where it gets even crazier. They then connect this whole web of control back to the 13th century.
Oh boy, here we go.
To the Vatican.
The Vatican, okay.
They talk about the 1213 Charter. In this charter, King John basically ceded control of England to the Pope.
Wait, hold on. The King of England answered to the Pope.
That's what they're saying, and it gets wilder.
Okay.
They then argue that the Magna Carta, this document we often see as a cornerstone of individual liberty, was actually rendered null and void multiple times by papal decree.
Really?
Yeah, demonstrating, at least in their view, the ultimate authority that the church held over secular rulers even back then.
So we're deep in the weeds of conspiracy here, questioning everything we thought we knew from the American Revolution to the Vatican's reach. Where do we even go from here?
Well, the researchers don't just stop at historical what-ifs. They connect these ancient power struggles to the systems we live under today, especially here in America.
Because, what good is a good conspiracy theory if it doesn't tie into the present day?
Exactly. And one of their more radical claims is that you and I, average citizens, are basically unwitting participants in a system that's been rigged against us from the get-go.
We're all pawns in a game we didn't even sign up for.
That's the idea. They dive into specific legal mechanisms that they claim are contributing to this. One example they give is the 14th Amendment.
The 14th Amendment, the one that grants citizenship and equal protection, right?
Yeah, on the surface, it seems pretty straightforward. But they argue that over time, it's been twisted, manipulated to actually erode states' rights and give more power to the federal government.
And more power to the federal government equals less freedom for the individual.
That's their thinking. They say that shift in power has led to a system where individual liberty is often sacrificed in the name of control.
So this isn't just about old charters and kings from centuries ago. We're talking about, like, the nuts and bolts of how America works right now.
Exactly. And maybe the most radical thing they propose is that people can actually break free from this system.
Break free, like escape the Matrix, Neo style.
Well, one of the researchers, Eamon, he actually shared his personal story. He claims he was able to expunge himself from the IRS system.
The IRS, bold move.
Yeah, he didn't just file his taxes early. He claims he did it by appealing to what he sees as the highest authorities in this whole web of power, the Pope and the Attorney General of Great Britain.
Okay, now I'm lost.
Yeah.
How does contacting the Pope and the British Attorney General get you out of paying taxes in America?
So, Iman's argument is all about these historical power structures, right? He believes that by acknowledging and appealing to who he sees as holding ultimate authority, he was basically able to nullify the IRS's jurisdiction over him.
So he played the game using their rules and somehow won.
That's how he sees it. He even claims he got confirmation from the Department of Justice, basically telling him to ignore any court orders related to his tax case.
Wow, that's a story. But even if he did somehow pull that off, what about everyone else? Are we all supposed to write letters to the Vatican now?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. Iman argues that true freedom is really about understanding our inherent rights as individuals. For example, he says, Social Security, which most people see as a right, is actually a gift from Congress.
A gift. So they could just, like, take it back.
Exactly. He's saying this distinction is crucial because it exposes the illusion of security and control that the system, in his view, is built on.
Okay, but if Social Security isn't a right, then what is? What's the way out?
Eamon points to a little-known legal precedent based on a congressional act from 1802. He interprets it as a way for individuals to renounce their U.S. citizenship, which he sees as the ultimate way to reclaim sovereignty.
Renouncing your citizenship, though, that's pretty extreme.
It is, and not something to take lightly. But his point is, we often don't even realize how much of our individual sovereignty we've already given up to the state.
Renouncing your citizenship, that's a big step. I don't know if I'm quite ready to pack my bags and find a new country just yet, but it does make you wonder, are there more subtle ways we're giving up our freedom without even knowing it?
And that's really what these researchers want us to do, to think critically about these systems and structures. They argue that knowledge is power. The more we understand how things really work, the better we can navigate them on our own terms.
So it's not about rebelling blindly. It's more like understand the rules of the game so you can play it better. Or maybe even opt out altogether, right?
Right. And one of their key points is the power of language. They argue that people in power have always used language really carefully to shape how we view the world, to maintain control.
Okay, so like, give me an example. How does language come into play here?
Well, they bring up the word person, specifically how it's used in legal documents. They
Yeah.
say it has a very specific meaning, not the same way we use it every day.
So when I see, like, name a person on a form, they're not talking about me.
That's what they're suggesting. They think person, in a legal sense, refers to this artificial entity, something created by the government.
So there's me, the human, and then there's this other me on paper, like a secret twin or something.
That's the idea. And it's this person, the paper one, that the government actually deals with.
Okay, that's kind of creepy. Like, we've all got these alternate identities we never signed up for.
And this person, this paper you, is bound by all these rules and regulations that might not actually apply to you as a flesh and blood individual.
That does sound a little Orwellian, to be honest.
Right. It's like this legal fiction, the separation between man and person is how they've been able to expand their power, maybe even beyond what the Constitution intended.
So what do we do about it? If we're unknowingly saying yes to this whole personhood thing, how do we become, like, sovereign individuals again?
They say the first step is simple awareness. Just realizing this difference between man and person. Once you see the game, you can make better choices about playing it.
So knowledge equals freedom. I like that. What else did they suggest?
They're big on educating yourself about the law, understanding your rights. They say you've got to be ready to challenge this system if you need to. True freedom isn't about blind obedience. It's about informed action.
That is powerful. It's not about, like, overthrowing everything. It's more about understanding how to exist within it, but on your own terms.
Exactly. And they also talk a lot about community, finding other people who are asking these same questions.
Right, because it can feel pretty overwhelming if you're thinking about all this alone.
Totally. It's about building a network, sharing what you learn, supporting each other in this process of, like, reclaiming your sovereignty.
Well, this deep dive has given us a lot to digest, from the American Revolution to the Vatican to the ins and outs of legal language. It's been quite the journey.
It really has. And we've just scratched the surface here, but I think it's a good jumping off point for anyone who wants to dig deeper into power, freedom, individual sovereignty, all that good stuff.
Totally. And if there's one thing to take away from all of this, it's don't be afraid to question, to challenge, to keep searching for the truth, even if it means facing some uncomfortable stuff.
I agree.
That's what this is all about, right? The pursuit of knowledge is how we find real freedom.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. But keep those conversations going. Do your own research, come to your own conclusions. Until next time, stay curious, friends.